Let's look at the structures of the upper respiratory tract. Let me get my pen on. Okay, the structures of the upper respiratory tract are the nasal cavity. Okay, we want to look at things that are in the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is going to be composed of, actually you have the nasal cavity and you have two parts of it. So there is separated by a septum. What bones are going to make up this septum? Okay, the bones that make up the septum for the nasal cavity are the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid bone, and then the vomer bone makes up the inferior portion. The nasal cavity is also going to be lined with pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, and in that pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, you also have goblet cells. Goblet cells are going to secrete mucus. Okay, mucus is going to moisten the nasal cavity so that whenever dirt or debris is in the air, it hopefully will stick to the mucus, and the ciliated cells here are going to sweep the mucus to the back portion or to the pharynx, where that's going to fall down the pharynx, go into the esophagus, and enter into the stomach. And those things will be destroyed by the acids in the stomach. Okay, the nasal cavity also has a structure or an area that's called the olfactory sensory area. Okay. Which one of your five senses is your olfactory sensory area going to play a part with? Smell. Okay, so the olfactory neurons are located in the olfactory sensory area. Okay, the olfactory neurons are going to be in contact with structures, and they're going to be stimulated, and the neurons are going to take that information. Actually, the neurons pass through the olfactory foramina. The olfactory foramina were in the cribriform plate, if you remember from last semester. And the cribriform plate was part of the ethmoid bone. Okay, this is going to take the information, or take the neurons up towards the brain, and then the information is going to go to the olfactory bulbs. Okay, then we're going to look at the pharynx. Let me erase some of this real fast so we can look at the pharynx and we can draw it a little bit. Remember that the pharynx is basically the throat. So you have three parts of the pharynx. So here we have the nasal cavity, here's the lips, the chin, here's the eye here. Oh, that's not too good. All the rest of it is good though, right? Okay, so here's the hard palate, here's the soft palate. The portion of the neck, or the portion back here at the back of the throat, that comes in contact with the nasal cavity is the nasopharynx. So we'll put that in green here. This is the nasopharynx. Okay, the structure that's kind of familiar with the nasopharynx is the opening to the pharyngeotympanic tube. Okay, remember that the pharyngeotympanic tube is going to function in equalizing pressure. One end of it is here in the nasopharynx, and the other end of it is over here in the middle ear. What other structures are in the middle ear? We have your malleus, those little bones in the ear, malleus, incus, and stapes, if you remember those. Okay. Let's look at the oropharynx. Here we'll make the oropharynx. Well, let's really kind of stretch that. The oropharynx is where food is actually going to pass through. Food passes through, along with the air. Okay. We want to look here. This right here would be the tongue. Here would be the tongue. And right behind the tongue would actually depress this structure here called the epiglottis. So let's label some of this stuff. Let's go ahead and label this right here, the pharynx. Okay, so the third part of the pharynx is the laryngopharynx. Okay, the laryngopharynx is going to be where is the inferior portion of the pharynx that is in contact with the larynx. So this right here would actually be the larynx and the vocal cords. We also want to look at your lacrimal glands while we're talking about the upper respiratory tract. I know lacrimal glands are not part of the actual respiratory tract, but they do put lacrimal secretions into the nasal cavity. So let's look at that real fast. Save a lot of time if this would work first time, wouldn't it? Okay, here's an eye. Here's the nose. This would be another eye over here. Okay, so here we're going to have a lacrimal gland. You know that the lacrimal glands make lacrimal secretions. Most people call them tears. So I'll refer to them as tears because it's faster for me to write the word tears than lacrimal secretions. So the lacrimal gland secretes lacrimal secretions. They go into these red little ducts here called lacrimal ducts. And the secretions are actually going to go towards the middle portion or midline of the eye. And they're going to drain into tubes. Those tubes are called, the little holes here, openings to the tubes, are called lacrimal puncta. So here we have our tubes. I really wish I had not used green there, but here I'll use blue. These holes here are called lacrimal puncta. And they're going to have your tears or your secretions from your eyes. Basically, they're emptying the secretions. So the secretions from the eyes enter the lacrimal puncta, and then they're going to drain into the nasal cavity. When they drain into the nasal cavity, it brings moisture to the nasal cavity. And if you remember, one of the functions of air, whenever it's inhaled, it's moistened. So it's going to help moisten that air. Another thing about this is if people have dry eye, one of the things that can be done, obviously sometimes people can have drops for their eyes, but you can also do a more permanent solution to it. And a person can plug up these little lacrimal puncta here, so that usually it's only one of them, but you can plug up both of them. And that's going to keep the secretions from leaving the eye. So that helps with dry eye. Okay, another condition or another possibility I want to talk about is that when people have allergies, then sometimes things get inflamed, and that's going to make these holes here a little bit smaller because of inflammation, which makes the tears not be able to drain into the lacrimal puncta, so that the tears or the water, your eyes stay watery, and maybe you even have like drops of lacrimal fluid coming over your cheeks. And that is why allergies, dry eye allergies can give you watery eyes. Okay, that's all of the upper respiratory tract.